Hello, everyone, and welcome to our three-part series on DEI and career pathways. It's the top of the hour wherever you happen to be, so we're glad you're joining us here today for Part 2, our DEI Career Pathways Part 2, the examples you have been seeking. I'm going to be the moderator today, and my name is Miranda Kennedy. I'm the Director of Training for the DEI with the NDI Technical Assistance Team. And I'm joined today by our two presenters, Brian Ingram, who is our DEI Career Pathways Subject Matter Expert on the DEI Technical Assistance Team, and as well Sarah Loazo, who's our newest TA liaison for the DEI, and she comes to us from Central Massachusetts, where she was a Round 5 DRC. So let's go ahead and talk about what are our learning objectives today. What do we hope you all will come away with? We're hoping our grantees and partners, others who are joining this call with us, are going to come away with successful strategies pulled directly from the field. We're going to be providing examples and walkthroughs from our Kansas DEI project on how they've impacted career pathways at the local level. In Massachusetts, we're going to be presenting on how the DEI project there has impacted career pathways at the local and regional level. And in Virginia, how that DEI project has impacted career pathways at the state level. So we're coming at it from a lot of different angles and different levels with examples that should be relevant or aspirational for all of us. So let's go ahead and to kick us off and get us started, because we know that we also have some new DRCs and others who might be hopping in at this point, and it's helpful for a review for everyone, but for some folks, this might be their first presentation they're catching on DEI and the career pathway. So we're going to do a little quick 4-slide review of WIOA career pathways before we dive into DEI examples. And I'm telling you that because I want you to know you can only expect 4 slides here. So this is kind of high-level examples just to make sure we all have the same floor from which we're building on top of with these examples. So in 2012, the U.S. Departments of Education, Health and Human Services, and Labor issued a joint letter with a definition of career pathways, that they are a series of connected education and training strategies and support services that enable individuals to secure industry-relevant certification and obtain employment within an occupational area and to advance to higher levels of future education and employment in that area. So how do career pathways do that? And that's what this slide spells out a bit. They do that by aligning with the skills and needs of the industry and the economy in the state or local region. They prepare an individual to be successful in any of a full range of secondary or post-secondary education options, including apprenticeships, which is going to be what we cover on that 4th slide, as well as including counseling to support an individual in achieving their education and career goals, and including, as appropriate, education offered concurrently with and in the same context as workforce preparation activities and training for a specific occupation or occupational cluster. They do this also by they organize education, training, and other services to meet the particular needs of an individual in a manner that accelerates the educational and career advancement of the individual to the extent practicable, and enabling that individual to attain a secondary school diploma or its recognized equivalent and at least one recognized post-secondary credential, and finally, helping an individual to enter or advance within a specific education, occupation, or occupational cluster. So let's talk about it. Just a quick reminder of why we are focusing on career pathways. What is important about using this strategy, and how is it beneficial and different than what we've done previously in workforce development? So according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, having a post-secondary credential is one of the major gateways to family-sustaining jobs. And in 2013, associate's degree holders earned about 19% more than high school graduates with no college, and 65% more than workers with less than a high school diploma. Long-term economic trends point to increasing demand for better educated workers. So by 2020, economists project that 65% of all jobs will require at least some post-secondary education. And career pathways, they focus on the holistic needs of both workers and employers. They do this by integrating resources into that single career pathway plan that engages service providers, training institutions, and employers to that creates longer-term impact for more people. So let's take a look at, here's the 6 key elements in career pathways. This is this next slide we have in front of us. And the WIOA definition of career pathways articulates the interdependence of career pathway programming with industry sector strategies and identifies the specific features and functions of the career pathway program. Under WIOA, state boards are responsible for aligning core partners and developing and improving the workforce system through the creation of career pathways, and career pathway plans must be consistent with the unified combined state plan required in WIOA. And this work really requires a change of mindset. Developing career pathways involves a process of coordinating and connecting different parts of multiple public and private services and activities to make up a comprehensive education and training system. So WIOA increases the emphasis on cross-system alignment, strategic planning, performance measurement, and data collection and utilization. So you see here the 6 key elements in career pathways, and we're going to be referencing those at the end of each of the next 3 examples, how those examples, like how they really showcase and fit into these key elements within career pathways. You're going to get that explicit information throughout the examples as well as tying them up at the end to just keep connecting back to this, to get us thinking in this mindset. So with that, our final slide is DEI Career Pathways Work Connecting to Apprenticeship. So we're including this slide at the end of our 4-slide overview of WIOA and the graphic here to showcase the role that apprenticeships play as one of multiple entry points for both well-prepared students and targeted populations, because this is a focus. Apprenticeship is a focus we want to drive home in terms of DEI projects making this connection in their career pathways works. Now in the comments section right now, I'm hoping everyone will go along with me here, and it'd be great if you could indicate if you are working with your state and federal apprenticeship office, and please tell us what state or local area you are in, and if you feel like it, 1 or 2 lines about how your DEI project is connecting with apprenticeship. So if you could take a moment to do that, that would be helpful. We know many of you are, and some of you have just started. I was on a call just this last week where the apprenticeship program from the state level presented to the DEI folks, and they're getting that up and running and kicked off. And I know many others are at different levels of engagement and agreements, and we'd love to see that reflected in the chat. So as you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and hand the ball over to my colleague and co-presenter here, Brian Ingram, and he's going to be breaking down for us the Kansas DEI 5 local level example. So Brian, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, well, thanks for the review, Miranda. And thank you to everybody who's on the line. Thank you for being here today to walk through these examples that we have heard you have been waiting for. Wow, the examples you've been waiting for. That's a bold statement, isn't it? I mean, how are we to know if the 3 examples we're covering today will really end up being the ones you've been waiting for? We're really going out on a limb here, aren't we? Well, my answer to you is yes, we are, and give me a chance to explain why. In the first training in this series, Miranda and Dave walked you through the basics of career pathways, how it figures into both WIOA and the DEI, and how a DEI project can, by pursuing its most basic goal of increased access for job seekers with disability to job center services and the outcomes associated with those services, can impact, influence, and we hope improve these customers' ability to access career pathways trainings. And maybe even the accessibility of the career pathways trainings themselves to these job seekers. They outlined how, due to the implementation of WIOA, there's currently a lot of activity around career pathways going on at the local, regional, and state levels. And they suggested that a DEI project might be able to impact this activity at all of those levels. So not coincidentally today, we're going to be looking at 3 examples from the field that we feel represent how a DEI project can do just that. Impact career pathways at the local, Kansas Round 5, regional, New York Round 5, and state levels, Virginia Round 8. And although each of these DEI projects is unique, and that each state that has a DEI project is facing its own challenges and opportunities around WIOA implementation, we hope that by reviewing what these 3 states have accomplished, you're going to be able to more clearly see how your projects can begin to move towards these types of outcomes, no matter where you find yourselves right now. All right, now I might be beginning to digress here, so I'm going to try to contain my excitement so that we can begin. And we're going to start by taking a look at the Kansas Round 5 project, which we feel represents how a DEI project can impact career pathways at a local level. I have to see if I can advance this slide, and look, I can, that's great. Okay, so we're going to begin with an overview. Shocking, huh? As the slide states, the first relevant bit of information is that the regions participating in the Round 5 Kansas DEI already had strong and effective relationships with existing career pathways programs. So it was pretty standard procedure to fund these trainings for customers receiving Title I adult, dislocated worker, and youth services. Now the DRCs learned this by doing what? By investigating, right? They identified what the career pathways programs were in their regions, and then they asked the Title I staff if they currently made use of them for their customers in need of training. Now, as I said on the last slide, this may or may not reflect the situation in your state or region, but because it's what this project found, they decided on a very simple but effective strategy to begin to increase access to these trainings locally for customers with disability. They partnered with these programs to provide access to customers with disabilities, and this led to engagement with local career pathways programs. That's it. They worked with the Title I staff to connect more customers with disability to Title I adult, youth, and dislocated worker services, and by doing so, they were able to take advantage of a customer flow that was pre-existing to connect customers with disability to career pathways trainings. Quite a few of them, in fact, as we're going to talk about a little bit later. Now, granted, this was only the first step, and there's a lot more to this example. But what I think is important here is that the Kansas project took a very effective first step toward developing an effective career pathway strategy by embracing the most basic element of the DEI itself, increasing access to Title I services for job seekers with disabilities. Now, before you start to think that this was effortless, I'm going to stop you. This initial strategy was simple, but it was far from easy. Let me explain by taking a look with you at exactly how they did it. So as I mentioned in the last slide, the Kansas DRCs reached out to Title I staff to refer new customers with disability to Title I adult dislocated worker and youth services, and also to identify any customers currently receiving these services that might be struggling due to experiencing disability and or multiple challenges to employment. But what steps did they take from there? Again, they did what any DRC might do. They helped identify what was challenging these customers, and they provided targeted support to move them through that pre-existing flow. For example, they discovered that many customers could benefit from additional career exploration activities, like informing customers about labor market trends, using enhanced career exploration strategies to develop a strong career-focused employment goal, providing connection to ongoing benefits planning, and working with customers and staff to anticipate accommodation needs and identify strategies to access resources to implement accommodations. Now, if you think about it, this kind of makes sense, right? If you're working with customers that experience multiple challenges to employment, there's a good chance that some of these challenges could be related to a gap in or lack of work history. This situation could very easily cause the customer and the staff to limit the employment discussion to part-time or entry-level positions with low wages. If that's all the customer and staff consider, the chances that the customer will be referred to adult services for training is very small. and therefore the customer is not going to be included in the pool of job seekers considered for training funding. This is equally true for benefits planning and accommodation strategies. If the job seeker and staff feel that the only way to maintain needed benefits is a low-wage or part-time placement, no referral to training, right? What about accommodation strategies? If they aren't known and considered, or if it's felt that there are no available resources to provide them, no referral to training. So the Kansas DRC stepped in to address these challenges, and in doing so, made it possible for many customers who may not have been considered for career pathways trainings to make it into that pool. So that's pretty cool, but that's not where they stopped. They continued to do more. Let's look at the next slide. So these DRCs didn't just make recommendations and move on. No, they continued to support these job seekers and staff by providing active resource coordination. Once that living wage employment goal that led to a career path had been identified, they worked with the job seeker and center staff to identify the challenges associated with reaching that goal, strategies to address those challenges, and possible resources to implement those strategies. They worked with the job seeker and communicated with the staff as these resources were approached and eligibility for them was established. And finally, they supported the customer and the staff to reach out to these providers once eligibility had been established and convene them if it was felt necessary to do so. So by providing active resource coordination to these job seekers and the staff working with them, the Kansas DRCs moved these customers further down the flow by ensuring not only that they were in the pool of job seekers considered for training, but that they were positioned to be the applicants who are most likely to benefit from such services. And that's not all. Let's look at the next slide. This slide shouldn't surprise anyone, right? Because what does active resource coordination lead to? Come on. IRTs, right? Yeah. And so, of course, the Kansas DRC supported the now enrolled in Title I customers and their new case managers to create an IRT to implement the plan they were developing. They helped to schedule a meeting, develop an agenda, and facilitate a meeting that helped the group reach consensus around the IRT's three key parameters, which are, all of us together, a shared employment goal, lines of communication, and a timeline of services. That is what makes an IRT, folks, and I'm going to say it one more time. Those of you who know me are probably laughing. A shared employment goal, lines of communication, and a timeline of services. Now, once the IRT was in place, our now weary DRCs could fade into the background a little bit as the newly created team took the lead in helping the job seeker move forward toward the employment goal. And it should be said that over the course of the Kansas Round 5 project, center and partner staff became more familiar with the active resource coordination IRT process, and they needed much less support to do it successfully. But even then, they weren't quite done because, as we're going to talk about in the next slide, there was one more big area of the flow where their support was needed. Okay. Now, the most important part of the flow to job seekers, which is understandable, is placement. And the Kansas DRCs realized that their support was needed in this part of the flow as well. As we mentioned when we discussed the career exploration supports, the DRCs did provide. Many of these job seekers experienced a lack of or a significant gap in their work history, and also in many cases in their education. These gaps led to a variety of placement challenges once these customers completed the trainings in their chosen fields. Because most employers defined a qualified applicant as someone who had not only attained the needed training certifications, but also had work experience in the industry or in a closely related field. Remember that in order to access the services they needed, these customers had embraced an employment goal that paid a living wage. In many industries, the jobs that paid these wages were not entry level, but actually a step or two above that. These customers, in many cases, even after successfully completing the qualifying trainings, lacked the prerequisite work experience to be considered for these living wage positions. So how are these concerns addressed? by using a variety of strategies based on the needs of each job seeker and supported by the IRT that had been created for the customer. This team included Title I business services and also additional resources provided by partnering agencies. The DRC worked with the members of the IRT to set up work-based learning opportunities like OJTs, paid work experiences, targeted internships. They worked with the partnering agencies to provide customized placement supports that included accommodating technologies, alternate or additional instruction by the employer, sign language interpreting support at the job site, job coaching, independent living support, ongoing benefits planning, transportation supports. I could go on. Using these strategies, they were able to address significant challenges to placement in living wage positions for a much higher percentage of the job seekers than would have been able to reach them without this kind of targeted support. So how well did they do? Why don't we move to the next slide and we can look at some outcomes. If I can get it to move. There it is. Okay, I think these outcomes pretty much speak for themselves, but we'll walk through them real quick. So the number of job seekers with disabilities who entered career pathways trainings was 183. The number that completed was 149. The number that entered paid work experiences, or OJTs, was 127. And the number of individuals employed to date, and I think my information is from January, was 91. So that's pretty impressive, I feel. And I think it's a testament to how effective those DEI strategies can be when they're applied in the right way. And how they can help you to make career pathways outcomes when they're applied in that direction. Okay, let's look at some challenges. Now, in order to put this example together, I spoke with the Kansas Round 5 state lead, Dale Tower, and two of the project's DRCs, Kristen Doze and Michaela Fink. That represented 2 of 3 of their active regions. And I asked them what challenges they encountered, and this is how they responded. They said that a lot of these customers had concerns about losing their Social Security benefits, and staff as well. They had concerns about a lack of educational attainment, and they had concerns about a lack of or a gap in work history. And as you can see, or as you heard in the former slides that we covered earlier, a little redundant there, but that's really where they focus their efforts, on addressing those challenges, to helping those customers move through the flow. So let's look at the lessons learned. And I think this is really important, and so important that I really kind of let the DRCs say this on their own, and I just kind of recorded what they told me. They said they were able to demonstrate that the existing support structure was adequate for a majority of the customers with disability if you treated disability as a barrier to employment and used the same kinds of approaches you would for any other barrier. And then this was a quote, "Don't make limiting assumptions." So basically I think what they're saying is that including these customers in the normal flow that already existed was really helpful, that there were a lot of supports in that flow and they were able to take advantage of them. And that's what the second point kind of points out too. Use the existing customer flow and standard DEI strategies to move customers with disabilities into career pathways training. And finally, they focused on enhancing existing project supports where needed to help an individual customer access services and reach outcomes. Career exploration, benefits planning support, ARC, IRT, all of those strategies are listed. Okay, so as Miranda promised, we're going to take a look at the 6 key elements of career pathways and kind of line that up with the example you just heard, the Kansas example. And this is our best take on how this example illustrates these elements. We feel like it illustrates element 3 quite nicely in the fact that they identify and engage education and training partners. They identify target populations, entry points, and recruitment strategies. They research and promote work-based learning opportunities. They should get a star by that one. and opportunities with business and industry. They develop integrated, accelerated, contextualized learning strategies. They provide flexible delivery methods, and they, of course, provide superior career services, case management, and comprehensive support services, and they provide employment assistance and retention services. So I think they also illustrate element 4 in that they identify sources of funding available from partnering agencies and related public-private resources, and they secure funding. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Miranda so that she can ask you a polling question.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Yes, the polling question is here on the page in front of you, and I'm going to go ahead and post it right now. I'm opening the poll. You'll see it over on the right-hand side as well. It's the same question as on the slide in front of you. And if you take a moment, folks, and respond to that, I'll read that here. So our polling question is, do the strategies being utilized at the local level in Kansas reflect the type of work that is taking place in the local areas in your DEI project? Your possible answers are yes, no, and the third option is, we're doing something, but it looks different. And if that's the case, let us know that, and if you could give us a brief description over in the chat of how it looks different, that would be great. So the poll is open. I'm going to be closing it here in just a moment. It looks like we've got almost half of our folks have started it, and we've got a number of folks who are in progress. I should have added a not sure, now that I'm thinking about that. If you're not sure, you could post that in the chat. How about that? Here we've got just a couple people who are still finishing up. We've got a few folks who haven't started. It doesn't take but a minute. I want to make sure I've got the folks who are in progress before I close out the poll. Okay, I'm going to close out the poll here in the next 5 seconds, folks. If you'd lock in your answers, that would be great. Okay. So it's going to take about 12 seconds to close out, and then we'll get our poll results. And this is a similar polling question that we're going to have after each of the next 2 examples as well. Poll results. And it looks like we're having an interesting result. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over. We're having a little bit of a technical issue. It looks like I'm not able to open those poll results. I'm going to work on that, Brian, and get back to you. And in the meantime, I'm going to hand things over to our colleague, Sarah, to be able to present on the Massachusetts DEI 5 local regional example from Central Massachusetts. So Sarah, I'm changing you over to presenter, and the ball is in your court, and please go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Miranda. I am so excited to share the work I did as part of being a disability resource coordinator in Massachusetts. I worked on the DEI 5 project for Central Massachusetts. Before I came on board, I had the good fortune of having our local Workforce Investment Board identify growing industries in our region, and in turn, a community college investing in several career pathways related to these fields. Our local Workforce Board had identified healthcare as one of the targeted industries. This is all before I came on board. And as I had mentioned, our local community college had built pathway trainings related to healthcare. One of those trainings included a classroom training for something called patient access and registration. Businesses in the healthcare field identified a shortage of applicants qualified in patient access and registration. So our region decided to use an existing memorandum of understanding with vocational rehabilitation and use DEI service delivery strategies to identify, assess, fund, and refer customers shared by WIOA and Title I to these trainings. And I can't wait to tell you all about how we did it. As many of you may know, healthcare is a very broad field with many different pathways. I like to think of myself as a pretty good detective, and I use my sleuthing skills to uncover healthcare career pathways that were in most need of qualified entry-level candidates. It was after attending a local career fair I learned about the need for more qualified applicants in patient access. I talked with many healthcare recruiters, and I kept hearing patient access as a job that was not easily being filled. Again, using my detective skills, I researched about the career pathways in patient access. I was impressed by how being certified as a healthcare access associate was a great entry point into a multidimensional, good-paying career. I also happened to have the good fortune of being able to work with my local U.S. Business Leadership Network, Work Without Limits, who connected me with a major hospital that also confirmed a high need for patient access associates. That hospital, UMass Memorial Medical Center, worked with me to create a competitive, paid work experience for graduates of the Classroom Patient Access Program. I'm going to go on to the next slide. I was starting to put the pieces together, and I knew I would need coordinated and targeted outreach to workforce and partners. I couldn't do this alone. I approached my Title I program manager at the time to discuss what I had learned and my plan to get the word out about this potentially awesome career pathway. We discussed co-enrollment of DEI Title I of customers with disabilities interested in this healthcare pathway. We discussed the possibility of reaching out to vocational rehabilitation using our existing MOU to identify likely applicants. And we discussed the possibility of using DEI strategies and funds to support the customers. So I approached VR to inform them of this referral opportunity. I used my existing relationship with the administrators and staff to present the idea of cooperating to meet this industry need. Using those handy detective skills, I was able to give a clear idea of what sort of skills and talents were needed to succeed in patient access and registration. I did this by carefully studying job descriptions and in my conversations with potential employers. For example, in this type of work, strong computer skills and an ability to perform quality customer service were high needs. Having past experience in the medical field was also an advantage. Having this information led to appropriate referrals from both Title I and VR, which of course in turn led to resource coordination and braided funding strategies, meaning we sharing costs for co-enrolled customers. Another referral source I had was the Central Massachusetts Employment Collaborative. I used my existing relationship with this network of local job developers to inform them of the opportunity and request referrals. So with VR, Title I, and the community partners from the collaborative spreading the word, we were able to get so many appropriate referrals. My partners did that heavy lifting for me. I was getting the calls, and they were the ones going out there spreading the good word about the career pathway of patient access. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Everyone played a different role and had different responsibilities. And I'm going to go into further detail about what each of us did, including WIOA, Title I Adult, vocational rehabilitation, the DEI on the regional and local level, our community college, the employer we worked with, Work Without Limits, which was our U.S. Business Leadership Network, and the Central Mass Employment Collaborative. And next slide. If you look carefully at WIOA I Title I Adult and WIOA Title III Vocational Rehabilitation, you can see many roles and responsibilities are the same. They're identical and interchangeable. That is great. who played what role was mainly job seeker dependent. We worked together to fit his or her needs. As Brian mentioned in the Kansas example, participation in integrated resource teams on behalf of an individual job seeker was a major key for success. Sometimes vocational rehabilitation paid for the classroom training, and Title I adults using DEI funds, we paid for a paid work experience. Sometimes the role was reversed. And move on to the next slide. DEI on the regional level, that would mean our local workforce investment boards, they had done local labor market research identifying what our needs were in our community. They convened the partners and created the memorandums of understanding and developed our referral model. The DEI on the local level, that met me, the GRC, I modeled active resource coordination for VR counselors and Title I case managers and community college staff. I basically co-case managed under Title I case managers and worked with them in working on active resource coordination and creating integrated resource teams. I acted as liaison between businesses and partners and modeled the development of a post-training, on-the-job training, and paid work experience opportunity. Move on to the next slide. Our community college provided the targeted employer-approved certified training, participated in IRTs with the Office of Disability Services and the instructors themselves, provided outreach for training at the job center. Something really exciting was I was able to have one of the instructors of the patient access class come into our one-stop to help me facilitate an informational session on the career path for patient access. I also worked with the instructors to provide flexible instruction as requested by individual students. The employer, UMass Memorial Medical Center, worked with me to identify and determine the skill sets they needed. They worked with me to identify appropriate training and certifications that would meet those needs. They agreed to interview training completers for internships, worked closely with partners to align the paid internship, supplement the career pathway training, and address gaps in work experience or education for selected graduates in training. This was a really important piece. UMass Memorial used experienced employees in patient access to mentor and train the interns they selected. Interns were able to get hands-on experience utilizing medical software and record systems, and this in turn gave the interns many tangible and useful skills to put on their resumes. And this did help interns get hired, and we'll talk a little bit about that soon. And move to the next slide. Work Without Limits was one of the partners with me on the DEI 5. They were also our local chapter of the U.S. Business Leadership Network. For those that aren't aware, the USBLN is an organization for businesses dedicated to ensuring inclusive practices, including hiring and retention of persons with disabilities. There are chapters all across the country, and I really urge anyone to seek out the USBLN closest to you. Our local chapter connected me with UMass Memorial, and they were the key piece of having the work-based learning experience become a reality. Central Mass Employment Collaborative, as I had mentioned earlier, was a local group of job developers working with VR and several community-based organizations. This group also helped me spread the word on patient access and provided me with even more referrals. Move to the next slide, and we're going to talk about outcomes. So I don't have the big numbers of Kansas. This was one training and it was a pilot, but I think these numbers were pretty impressive. This is for the 2016 fiscal year. The number of job seekers with disabilities who entered patient access and registration training were 29. We had 27 people complete it. 12 were accepted into the paid work experience with UMass Memorial. Out of the entire training, 20 out of the 27 that completed it received full-time employment. 11 out of the 12 that had a paid work experience were offered and received full-time employment. These are great numbers, and it was clear to me that the paid work experience definitely benefited those that were participating in it. We were not without our challenges. This was new, and not everything ran smoothly. Unfortunately, we were not able to coordinate with our business services in our local one-stop to promote this pilot with their existing employer base. Our site in particular had some turnover and changes made to how business services operated, so I was not able to use them as a resource. I think if I were able to, that could have been a great benefit. Another challenge was developing a plan to communicate what we felt to be the wider significance of the pilot to the participating system administrators. My one wish was that seeing what we did with patient access and work-based learning could have been continued past DEI with other funding mechanisms. For example, our agency had an existing on-the-job training grant, but the system that was utilizing the funds didn't work for many people with disabilities. It had to be full-time. It was a reimbursement to the employer. There were just some other rules and challenges around it that made it difficult. We were able to modify that using DEI funds to make a paid work experience that worked for a lot more people. And I was hoping that we would be able to continue it with other funding past DEI. Another challenge we ran into was with the hospital that did the paid work experience, communicating with the unions that were active in the hospital to ensure their cooperation with the pilot. Unfortunately, for a while, this was on hold because the unions did not agree that this was something that was beneficial to their union employees. I was fortunate, however, to have a partner within HR at UMass Memorial meet with the union, and they internally came up with an agreement that worked. So it's always, I think, great to have an employer partner that's really working with you. I'm going to move to the next slide. We learned a lot of lessons through this experience and can recall. Many participants with disabilities were adequately supported by standing procedures and strategies given the opportunity. What was so helpful was I already had an MOU in place. Already, our local region had worked with DR before, so we had that pre-existing relationship. When the DEI strategies were applied, a majority of customers with disabilities were adequately supported, and I think you can see that with our outcomes. The effort to identify and outreach to potential partners to identify likely candidates for the healthcare pathway created new relationships, deepened existing ones, and helped to communicate how the career pathway system could be used effectively across multiple demographics. And lastly, the USBLN can be effectively leveraged to be an operational resource to WIOA partners, which I think is a really great tool that people across the entire country can use. So I'm going to move to the next slide. And as we had mentioned before, we want to connect these to the 6 key career pathway elements. And my example really identifies the first 3. We were building the cross-agency partnerships and clarifying roles, working with VR and other agencies. We identified the industry sectors and engaged employers. Employer engagement is so important. You can have a great career pathway and a great training, but if there aren't jobs at the end of it, no one benefits. So that's a really important piece of it. Also, it helped us to bring in people who were the most appropriate for the referrals. And the third piece is design, education, and training programs. Unfortunately, I worked with a great community college that created the classroom training. We happened to have the only one in the state that was an in-classroom training for patient access. Also, we were able to create the work-based learning opportunity with the employer, which I think is an important piece. So in turn, I think this helps provide the employment assistance and retention assistance that people needed to get into really good paying jobs and entering into a really exciting career pathway. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Miranda for the poll question.
Great.
Miranda.
Thank you, Sarah. And I think we've got, if I can move this forward, great. I'm going to post the poll question. I understand that folks on the line can see it and I can't, so that's an interesting new trick to our poll. But I'm going to open the poll right now. We have 2 minutes to complete this poll based on the information that Sarah just shared out of the local and regional level in Central Massachusetts. Do the strategies being used at that level in Massachusetts reflect the type of work that's taking place at the local and regional levels in your DEI project? Your answers, I actually have a 4th answer over in the poll on the right. Yes, no, not sure. Perhaps you're pretty new and you don't know yet, in which case you can indicate that. Or we are doing, or looking into it. The 4th option is we are doing something but it looks different, in which case it would be great to give a short description of that in the chat. So, looks like we've got a number of folks in progress and a number of folks who've already finished it. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking some time. For those who haven't started, oh, good, I see folks starting it right now. And now I'm getting the test results. Okay, I think I clicked a button that corrected that. Thank you, Laura, for your help behind the scenes. So now I can see an indication of, we have a number of folks who are saying yes. About almost 30% of folks on the line, Sarah, are saying yes. They are doing something along these lines. A minority of folks, 3% are saying no. Some folks are not sure. Some are doing something that it looks different. And we still have a couple of people in progress right now. So as that time is wrapping up. Okay. So for now, it looks like 28% are saying yes of the respondents. There are a decent number who haven't, but 28% are saying yes, 5% are saying no, 13% are saying not sure. Glad I added that category. That helps. And 13% are saying they're doing something, but it looks different. So it'd be interesting to see what those folks look like in the. I'm going to go ahead and close out the poll, which will take a couple of seconds. So for those of you who are in progress, you can still get your answers in the next 10 seconds. And thanks, everyone. It's helpful for us to know kind of where folks stand and you know, what these examples speak to in terms of your experience. And with that, I'm going to come over and segue over to our colleague, Brian. So he can bring us home with our final example out of our Virginia DEI project with work that's taking place at the state level. All right, Brian, go ahead and take it away.
Okay, thanks, Miranda. I will be happy to. And as the slide says, folks, this is the Virginia DEI Round 8 state level example. And for the sake of time, we're going to just go right in. See if I can advance this. Okay. So now the first thing I feel it's important to point out about the Virginia example is that the state has implemented 2 earlier DEI projects prior to this, Round 1 and Round 4. And the state level administrators have been consistent through all 3 rounds. The state of Virginia has had DEI projects in the beginning, the middle, and the latest incarnation of the DEI so far. And they've learned and refined their approach to reflect this vast store of experience. Now, this is especially true when they were considering how the project might have the most significant impact possible on their emerging WIOA career pathway system at the state level. Now, our hope is that even though the conditions I just described in Virginia may not reflect the situation in your state, some of the conclusions that they've reached and the strategies that they developed could be useful for you to review and understand and possibly apply. So back to the slide. Now, I happen to know, because of conversations I had with the project lead, Sinclair Hubbard, that when this very experienced core of state-level administrators were deciding how they wished to construct the design for their Round 8 DEI project, they knew that they wanted it to have an impact on their state's level, on their state's efforts to implement a standardized career pathway system as required under WIOA. They knew that this effort to set up this system was moving forward as outlined in their state plan. And that the proposed activities of the DEI were not necessarily connected to these other systems efforts, but might be very relevant to them. So here's what they did. As a part of the Round 8 project, they created the DEI leadership team, which was composed of administrative level representatives of all the partners covered in the state's WIOA plan. And it was tasked with exploring ways to make the state's career pathway system more accessible to customers with disability and to guide and assess Virginia's Round 8 project as it develops and operationalizes strategies to do so. But it had an even bigger role than that to play. And we're going to look at the next slide. Okay. So let's look at the roles and responsibilities of that DEI leadership team. The leadership team consults regularly with other state-level groups focused on developing career pathways, which are the Career Pathways Work Group, which advises state leaders on policies related to career pathways, and also the WIOA State Implementation Team. And it receives guidance and recommendations intended to connect the DEI project to the state's WIOA implementation activities. The leadership team also monitors and guides the activities of the DEI project at the local and regional levels. So the leadership team acts as a way to link the activities of the DEI project at the local and regional levels to the ongoing activities to implement WIOA and standardized career pathways at a state level. It creates a line of communication, if you will, between these different levels that we've been discussing, the local, the regional, and the state. Let's continue to look at this. It's interesting. Okay. So, this slide just more clearly defines the outline I described for you on the previous one, but it does point out a few new and important pieces of the puzzle. Number one, the DEI leadership team, the Career Pathways Work Group, and the WIOA State Implementation Team have overlapping membership due to a recognized shared focus. Also, the DEI leadership team will consult regularly with the Career Pathways Work Group and WIOA State Implementation Team for guidance and recommendations to strengthen project implementation. So to summarize, the three state-level teams share some of their membership, meaning some members of the DEI leadership team are also members of the Career Pathways Work Group, WIOA Implementation Team, or both. So it's a fairly safe assumption that this should lead to a better understanding of where these three groups' goals overlap and how the efforts of the DEI project might be relevant to the larger goals of career pathways and WIOA implementation in Virginia, right? Oh, wait a minute. Wait a minute. I'm just imagining all you out there saying that this is all well and good, Brian, but this is pretty high-level stuff. I mean, how does this relate to the actual activities of the DEI project, the day-to-day stuff out there where services are delivered? Yeah, I hear you, and it's a fair enough question. So let's look at how the DEI project itself figures into all of this. Come on. Look, I think I did two there. Forgive me. Okay, I'm on the right slide now. So what's on this slide? It's a list of the Virginia Round 8 DEI's goals. Let's look at the first one to begin. Review and revise IT training programs with universal access principles in mind. Now, IT is a targeted industry that was identified by the project as an area of focus, and that makes sense in this context. And reviewing it in the light of universal access principles also makes sense from a DEI perspective, right? But I think the thing to consider today is that administrative level representatives, from Title II, that's education, are going to be sitting on the DEI leadership team. So that should help with both access to that IT curriculum and any attempt to revise it. So any effort made to do this could be shared with or advocated for in front of the Career Pathways Work Group and the WIOA State Implementation Team as well. So I think you're beginning to see that this could be pretty cool. And firstly, well, the other three bullets on this slide should look familiar to you after the first two examples, right? So firstly, they're going to involve ticket to work services like benefits planning and long-term retention services to help customers with disabilities successfully engage and complete career pathways trainings. Secondly, they're going to outreach to the disability community directly around the services and outcomes that might be available through access to the career pathway system. Again, that's something each of our earlier examples have done in one way or another. And finally, they're going to encourage co-enrollments to increase training and support services for customers. Now that sounds like an IRT, which is a DEI project's bread and butter, right? So the next slide gets even more detailed, which is good. Okay. Now I love these statements because they're clear and they define who the Virginia DEI is hoping to involve around individual customers seeking co-enrollments. Again, read IRT. With Title I, vocational rehabilitation, the community colleges, Wagner-Pizer, and the Department of Veterans Services. And finally, targeting all these other systems, they make a statement of focus on SSA beneficiaries, who one would hope be ticket holders being served by the Workforce EN as the DEI creates. Again, this DEI project itself, there's a lot of resemblance to the projects in Kansas and Massachusetts, right? So let's take a minute to look at what the DRCs are doing on the next slide. Okay, there it is. So I want to thank all of you who called me out a few slides ago because you made such a great point. It's when we get down to the DRCs at the service delivery level that it all starts to make some sense, at least to me. So let's look at these activities.
Hey, Brian, can you hang on just a second? I know there's a little bit of a delay in the slides, it seems like, from your end. Do you want me to try to move things forward?
Sure, if you'd like to.
We're still on the DEI project continued and not on the DRC role slide.
I should be on slide 41.
You're on slide 40. I'm going to go ahead and take the ball from you and see if that helps at all. Sometimes there's just internet lag issues. Oh, and I just took it and it switched over. So there was a delay. Let's see if me moving your slides for you moves a little faster. Sorry, folks. This is technological.
Yeah, I need you to move one more ahead. Right,
one more ahead? Okay. So we're on slide 41 with DRCs, and now I'm going to move us to slide.
Actually, I'm not seeing that. I see us on DEI project continued.
Okay, all right. Well, I've got us. Everybody else hopefully sees the DRC's slide. I'll just move things forward and see if it works.
Okay, we will move forward from here then. And I believe I was thanking everybody who called me out a few slides ago. And it is when we look at the DRCs and what they're doing at the service delivery level that this really starts to come into focus. So they are, they are facilitating alignment of activities to enhance partnerships across multiple service delivery systems. They're conducting cross-agency trainings around career pathways, disability awareness, Section 188, accessibility technology in the workplace, customer flow, on and on. They're collaborating with workforce partners and AJC business services teams to identify business sectors with a career pathway to focus on. They're sharing accessible curricula and training developed for other career pathways projects with the region's adult education partners. And they're developing partnerships with business, creating a value-added approach by providing technical assistance and education to businesses on universal design assistive technology and employment of qualified job seekers with disabilities. Okay. So finally, we've put together a flow slide, and I think it really clarifies how this project is intended to function. Let's take a look at it. Oh, and I actually see it, so that's good. Here it is, project activities at each level, distilled and bulleted. This is where I think you can really see how beautifully this project is laid out. At the local level, you have our busy DRCs who are providing customers with IRTs, connecting them with the Workforce EN and benefits planning, working to provide trainings across partners to improve performance around shared customers, and outreaching to business to develop placement strategies for individual shared customers. At the regional level, you have the DRCs and project administrators looking for opportunities to build pilots, as we saw in Massachusetts. You have the cross-partner trainings, which of course have a regional as well as local relevance, and you have business outreach. Again, this time using activities that might include a whole regional industry sector as opposed to a local business within it. And then there's the state level. And the first bullet is to build that communication loop from state to region to local and local to region to state. Then support local efforts at career pathways access. So the state level administrators might actively advocate with their local level counterparts to encourage them to engage in these activities, which is brilliant. The same for regional efforts to establish pilots. The state level group could advocate for that. They can reach out to targeted industries using state level strategies. And finally, use the leadership team's access to the state level career pathways and WIOA implementation activities to highlight project outcomes and findings as Virginia's WIOA system is implemented. It's a top to bottom, bottom to top approach to systems change that is made possible through the implementation of the DEI project. Okay, with that being said, let's look at how this example lines up with the CP elements. Well, you should be noticing a trend here because the Virginia Round 8 DEI project, in our opinion, manages to include all but one of the 6 elements. So let's take a look. Element 1, building cross-agency partnerships and clarifying roles. So they're engaging cross-agency partners and employers, they're establishing a shared vision, mission, and set of goals, and they're defining the roles and responsibilities of all partners. Element 2, they're identifying industry sectors and engaging employers. They're conducting labor market analysis to target high demand and growing industries, identifying the skill, competencies, and associated training needs, and they're sustaining and expanding business partnerships. They also embody element 3 in a bunch of ways, designing education and training programs. So they're going to identify and engage education and training partners. They're going to identify target populations, entry points, and recruitment strategies. They're going to review, develop, and modify competency models with employers and develop and validate career ladders and lattices. They're going to develop or modify programs to ensure that they meet industry-recognized and or post-secondary credentials, research and promote work-based learning opportunities within business and industry, develop integrated, accelerated, contextualized learning strategies, provide flexible delivery methods, provide career services, case management, and comprehensive support services, and provide employment assistance and retention services. That was a big one.
Brian, I'm really glad we gave our captioning person this information ahead of time.
I know. It just was flying out of my lips, wasn't it?
Okay, well, we still have more to go.
I know. There's another page. Okay, element 4. It identifies funding needs and sources. It identifies the costs associated with system and program development and operations. It identifies sources of funding available from partnering agencies, and it develops long-term sustainability plan with state or local partners. And element 5, it aligns policies and programs. It identifies state and local policies necessary to implement career pathway systems. It identifies and pursues needed reforms in state and local policy, and it implements statutory and administrative procedures to facilitate cross-agency collaboration. Whew. So, now, when we're looking at the 6 elements, you know, I would argue that these DEI projects are reflecting the 6 elements more than implementing them, you know, in the larger sense. But I think it's important to keep the 6 elements in mind, because if your activities are falling within those 6 elements, then they're going to have relevance to that career pathway system that's being built by the WIOA partners. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to you, Miranda, for the polling question.
Boy, thank you, Brian. Yes. You know the drill. These questions, we're just trying to figure out where you're at in terms of these types of examples that we're sharing. So This is a similar type question to what you responded to the last 2 times, but the question is, do the strategies being utilized at the state level in Virginia reflect the type of work that is taking place in the state level in your DEI project? Your possible answer is not sure, or we're doing something, but it looks very different, in which case it'd be great to get a short description in the chat. You see a lot of folks are getting started with getting their answers in here. These are anonymous polls, so please feel free to be honest. Although we do love any information you give us in the chat. It's very helpful. And we have ideas. We're, working with our project, certainly. But we'll give it another minute. We've got a few more folks who are getting started, and a couple folks who aren't started yet. It only takes just a second. It's over on the right-hand side. Oh, while we're waiting for folks to respond, John Banas noted in the chat that we were only given 5 key elements out of the 6 for Virginia. Brian, you want to address that?
Sure. I believe that's what I said, but if it isn't what I said, it's what I meant to say, was 5 of the 6 elements. So forgive me if it came out wrong.
All right, we know we've got what's the version of an eagle-eared viewer instead of eagle-eye? Okay. All right, folks, it's looking like we have about half of the folks who joined us have responded. Thank you for taking the time to do that. A couple people are still in progress. We'd love to get your answers locked in, but right now it's looking like about 20% are saying yes, that they are doing this type of work at the state level. And actually that was 19%. I was rounding it up to 20, but it just knocked up to 20, so that's exciting. No, 14% are not. Not sure, that's about 10%. We're doing something, but it looks different. That's 3%, and about half of our folks haven't responded yet. But we've got a couple who are still filling out the poll, so if you could finish that up, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. That takes about 20 seconds to do that. Thanks, everyone, for sharing, and I see that we've got a few folks writing into the chat as well, which is great. Looking forward to seeing what you have to share there. We also have a post-training survey, and you're welcome to, if the timing was a little too sharp for you in terms of responding during the webinar, we'd love to get your feedback and thoughts on this in the comments section on the post-training survey that we hope you'll take just a moment to complete. All right, and with that, be able to move. My slides are getting a little sticky now too, Brian. Okay, summary and next steps. So this is just wrapping up for today. We certainly gave ourselves some time here at the end because we wanted to get through all 3 of the examples, and we have some time available if there's questions, so we can do that. But before we get to the questions, just a quick reminder of all the things that we have covered here today. Now hopefully you have information on strategies from our Kansas DEI project on impacting career pathways at the local level. Information and strategies from our example from the Massachusetts project on local and regional level work and the pilot that they did there in central Massachusetts, as well as what Virginia DEI has done and a breakdown on how they're impacting career pathways at the state level. So this is the information we've covered in a very tidy hour and 8 minutes. The next steps, we're hoping you'll stay tuned for our part 3, but we do also want to go ahead and open up things, and you can put information into the chat. You're welcome to raise your hand if you have any questions or comments, want to go back to anything here that Brian or Sarah have covered from their examples. We do have some time available to us, so feel free to raise your hand. We'd love to unmute your line and hear your feedback on maybe what you're doing in your local area or your state. So questions, comments, this is your time here, so feel free to use that. All right, I'm just going to check in with Brian and Sarah and seeing if they've gotten anything, maybe perhaps privately on the chat.
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet? Okay.
I did see a question about the community college and how we got them to develop and offer the certification training. So I think that's referred to me, so I can answer that.
Could you read the question and then, yeah, give your response, Sarah? That would be great. I don't see that on my end, but if you could share that, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, so the question was, what did the conversation between you and your community college look like? How did you get them to develop and offer the certification training? And the good news for me was I didn't have to do anything. Our local community college had an employee that, actually I think a group of employees that specialized in implementing and supporting industry-specific career pathway trainings. And that was in place prior to me coming on board. So the trainings were already there. And I just used DEI strategies to make sure that people with disabilities could take advantage of them.
And if you think about that in light of the guidance that we've gotten as well, it is about utilizing existing career pathway programs, right, Sarah?
Yes, absolutely. There's no need to create anything new. It's just making sure that we can make the existing programs inclusive for more people.
Because if you were to develop something from scratch, you could probably spend all of your time doing that instead of leveraging what's already available and getting much further in terms of impacting more programs and being more strategic about that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's a great question. All right. Brian, anyone chatting with you individually?
Nope.
Okay. I don't see. We've got a little bit of a quiet crew here. I'm imagining folks maybe are just processing this information and can't wait to take it back to their projects and have these discussions and hopefully including your TA liaisons on that. And we can certainly follow up in those more targeted discussions with all of you as we continue this work that we are all doing and in the process of. Oh, I think there might be something in the Q&A. I'm just going to hop over there and see. Oh, people are asking if they can have copies of the slides. All right. So, oh, and actually, I'm going to go ahead and unmute the line of our new Round 8 project lead from Colorado, Stephen Gold. It looks like you have a question. I've unmuted your line. Hi, Stephen.
That was, excuse me, hello. That was me asking if we could get a copy of the slides.
Okay. Yes, of course. All right, so for everyone, for folks who are new to our webinars, when you're coming in, and this is just for future reference, you can download the PowerPoint as you're entering the webinar. We also do a download at the end. I'm about to do that now. And we also post the PowerPoint with the archive of the webinar on Workforce GPS. So I'll go ahead and do that. Thanks, Steve. It's nice to hear your voice. Any thoughts or comments as long as I've got your line unmuted about today?
No, it was great to hear the examples, though, and a reminder about leveraging the resources that are already in place. That helps me panic less. Thank you.
Well, Neil, you don't need to panic at all. And for everyone who's on the line, Colorado is one of our 2 projects under Round 8 that has not had a previous DEI grant in their state. So they really are standing on the shoulders of some giants here. And I know having these examples, you're probably feeling pretty good coming in as a Round 8 because we were living into these to give them to you, Steve. So nice timing on that. Okay, folks, I'm going to go ahead and do a file transfer here and see if that works for us.
Hey, Miranda, do we have a resources slide?
What's that?
A resources slide?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and show that as well. Sorry, I was responding to Steve.
Oh, no. Cool. I just had somebody
yeah, we have a resources slide and we have a contact slide as well. I'll get that for folks. I'm just going to bring up today's PowerPoint because it does take a little while for folks to download that, and it sounds like there might be some folks who didn't catch it on their way in and who might want it before it's ready. Here we go. Oh, that's our part 1. I almost gave you part 1, but you're probably all wanting part 2. So I think that's the one I just gave you is the part 2. I'm going to go ahead and move this over, and we've just our last couple slides here. Next steps are stay tuned for part 3. We're going to break things down even further, give a little bit more of a guide, and then we also have a resources slide here with, there's the Career Pathways collection site from Workforce GPS, our part 1, the archive from that in case you haven't caught that, as well as expanding apprenticeship for individuals with disabilities. We had mentioned apprenticeship earlier. So you'll find that information in the PowerPoint as you download it. Here's the contact information for folks. Most of you should have this, but some of you might not. And feel free to reach out to us and connect with us if you have any other questions, want to further the conversation individually. And I don't know, Brian, in terms of wrap-up, I know we've talked a little bit, and we've got just a little bit of time here. Did you want to say anything about part 3?
Well, just that part 3, we're really going to focus on building on these examples to kind of provide a career pathways framework for you. And the hope is that the framework can be applied no matter where your project or your state is starting, and give you some idea of how to develop some relevant steps to take on the career pathways topic that are going to move you forward to having an impact. So that's the idea behind the part 3. I hope you will all attend. It's going to kind of put it all together for you is the hope.
Great. Thank you so much, Brian. And I don't know, Sarah, do you have any last words of wisdom or, encouragement for folks as we're wrapping up here today and they're moving forward and thinking about these examples?
I think the only thing that I can say from my experience in working as a DRC is find out what your community is already doing and see how DEI can support that. As I'm sure right in your community, there's already career pathway programs. There's people that are working with employers, and just try to find out who those people are and work with them.
I think those are excellent words to end on, and I'd like to thank everyone for spending your time this afternoon with us as we've gone through these examples and broken it down and with the 6 key elements. I do hope you will take just a moment as you're wrapping up today after you've downloaded the PowerPoint to take just a minute to fill out the post-training survey. We really value and appreciate your feedback on this, and we incorporate that into future trainings. So if you include some comments, we might be able to incorporate that into part 3. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up for today, and thank you all again, and have a wonderful rest of your Monday afternoon. I think it's Monday. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thank you.